Welcome back, everybody, to the My Generation podcast. Today, we're going to be once again going into the music creating process with another local Kent artist. Today, we're speaking to Canterbury-based band Struck Down. They're a 5-piece, self-described doom groove metal band, heavily riff-driven with a tight rhythm section and catchy vocal hooks. We're going to be going through their music creating process, but also talking about and analysing their new song Wandering Child, which recently released on August 3rd and is the single off of the upcoming EP entitled From Demons. Welcome to the show. We're going to be speaking today to their frontman Linden. We're speaking to guitarists Will and Ian, bassist Anthony, and on the drums it's Tommy. How are you all doing?
Yeah, good man. Yeah, that was smooth as well. Can I just say that? That was super.
I'll take the name change.
We did call Andy Anthony though.
Yeah.
What we haven't told Andy yet is.
Can we just keep it in?
Oh, we're keeping it all in. Don't worry. We're such a raw show. Of course, we're keeping
We'll
it
just
in.
make him change his name.
Yeah. Yeah. So on today's show, like we have with other music creating process episodes, going behind the scenes on the songs you know and love from these local Kent artists, as well as some new features here on the show. As you'll know, every week if you've been listening to the My Generation podcast, we have a music album review feature and a film review feature. But joining us from this week, it's a very poignant episode. We've got 3 new weekly features joining the My Generation podcast. We have Emma Cusson, who does poetry readings, Joe Finnegan, who reviews video games, and Tom Axtell, who does a very interesting new feature doing pirate profiles, giving you stories from pirates of old. All 3 of those new features are joining the My Generation podcast for the first time this week, and they'll be continuing every single Thursday from here on out. So stay tuned later on in the episode to hear their stories. Also, here, if you're listening on YouTube, you'll be seeing a graphic which has all the timestamps for all of the things we're going to be waffling on about throughout this episode, all of the questions. So there's a specific part of the band's story that you want to hear about, you can go and find it. I'd love to know, actually, guys, I wanted to really start with, individually, where did all of your loves for music come from? We'll start with Linden. Where did you first get involved with music?
It's a funny thing. I think I was inspired to sort of get into music quite a while before I had the opportunity to. I never saw myself as a singer, so it was always about playing instruments. And as a kid, my cousins had a band, which, to be honest, I just completely idolised. I mean, I figured that every band was famous. And it was only really sort of like getting into secondary school, I had the chance to play on like various instruments till I convinced myself that I'm not good enough to do any of these. I need to be a frontman. But I'd say that it's just more family influence of the music that I was put into, and what got me interested would be like the sort of new metal that my brother would listen to, and then the vast array of stuff that my dad would listen to. I still now have quite a sort of strange taste and want for like a mix of things just in an afternoon almost.
Each of you as well, obviously had a look around, and I've got some notes on the band here, and you've all got very interesting nicknames as well, which I wanted to ask you all about and where they all stemmed from. So Linden, probably one of the more interesting ones is as WookieBear. I did want to know where that came from.
It was a nickname at first that not many people called me, but when I was sort of like 18, 19, I could drink a lot more than I can now. So it was along the lines of that I was a fluffy animal type thing. I don't really know like the full origins of it.
Oh, amazing. That's perfect. Well, yeah, everyone else in the band's also got great nicknames as well. I just had to get that one out of the way first. So you've been, obviously, it started off in secondary school as well, and did that sort of come in the form of then sort of performing live as well throughout your secondary school age, or did that sort of come as you moved on into sort of, college age and moving out into the world of performing gigs?
I've always found myself I've quite often found myself the centre of attention. I'm not on stage. That was just like chucking fuel on a fire. It meant that the sort of character that I sort of added to how I would try and make an impression on someone whilst out or whatever, I could just almost completely recreate characters on stage and I'd go for it as much as not even what I would let myself go for is almost what the character I'm portraying could go for on stage.
Amazing. And now moving across to Will then. Will is known as the Wizard. Will, where did you first get into music? Where did your love stem from?
I started playing guitar in secondary school, similar to like Linden's story. Joined a few random bands, but we were playing like Busted and stuff like that because, you know, that was me then. I did a couple of performances at school playing the xylophone. They never let me play guitar, so that gives you a level of how terrible I am at guitar. The main sort of influence, I would say, was from like my dad, like Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd, the sort of older metal or like rock bands. So the very first time I ever picked up guitar, like to really learn something, though, was AC/DC. I was a massive fan of just the whole of AC/DC's discography, and that was that pretty much. And, you know, from there on, that was me playing guitar up to now.
Yeah, and were you playing the guitar when you sort of joined various bands as well around the sort of secondary school age? Because it seems like quite a departure from the xylophone.
Yeah, well, no, I got put on that because I couldn't play guitar well enough. Basically, that's the honest truth of it.
I kind of wish you'd still be on there, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right, future records, I'm sure.
But no, I basically just got a lot of crap for not being good enough on guitar. Like I could play all your chords and stuff, but I couldn't do covers. Like a lot of the people in my year would play like Nirvana songs back to back and Feeder, and I got a lot of bullying for it because I just couldn't learn that sort of what was popular at the time. So that sort of stemmed why I was on the xylophone, basically. I didn't really ever play live guitar until I met Linden. First time I ever played guitar in front of anyone outside of a small practice room or in front of your schoolmates, like on any sort of stage, was Wookie and the Wizard, which moves me on to the name.
Perfect segue.
What a segue! So when I met Linden, he was called Wookie. I remember he walked into practice, and I was like, I recognise this man. Turns out we went to the same primary school. I think there's 4 years difference, Linden? 4 or 5? I don't know how.
Something like that, mate.
Yeah, something like that.
I think your memory of me was better than mine was of yours.
Me and Linden we started doing acoustic after that. Like the band he was in, kind of, it was working out but not working out sort of thing. That's a whole nother story.
It never getting gigged, did it?
Yeah, no. So we started playing up and down the whole of Kent acoustically as just Wookie and Will. And then one evening we were asked, everyone had these really cool names on this particular like board, and I was like, Christ, we actually need a duo name. And my dad, his nickname at work's Magic Mason. So I thought, right, I can't be Magic Mason because I'm nowhere near as good, but I'll be like the Wizard, like the Apprentice. And it kind of sounded good, didn't it? It was like the Wookie and the Wizard, and it kind of just stuck. And
That's
everyone
catchy.
just would remember us, as Wookie and the Wizard. You know, a bear and a magician. What an album cover that would have been.
Probably quite different from all that performing, you know, away from people where you and now coming out and doing it live. I mean, what was the difference like for you then personally, going from the practice room for so many years to then doing it live?
The nerves I didn't really I wanted to do it, but I was never given the opportunity in school, apart from the xylophone in the back of some corner with a curtain over me. So basically outside. but Linden kind of didn't. I don't think he really cared as far as he concerned. I could play guitar and we'd write well together, and that was kind of good enough because I had more willingness to do things than other people. Like, I was happy to be there. I didn't feel like it was ever a chore. Linden would turn up to my house before we went to a gig or an open mic night or whatever, and we'd write a song like an hour before we played it. Yeah. We were just writing constantly, and that kind of gave me confidence. And then eventually when the band formed and we started playing a few gigs then, I mean, you watch early band videos of me and I was looking down constantly. Like, I just couldn't look at people because it was kind of this whole I'm being judged sort of thing. So it's only the last sort of 2-3 years I've started to grow in confidence on the stage, sort of take the role of a lead guitarist more rather than just playing behind people, which is strange because the reason I got into guitar, like a big influence again, like playing wise, was Angus Young, who's far from shy. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, building up that eye contact is quite important for the audience connection. But the transition across from doing it to like a small intimate group is completely different. So that's an incredible transition. Right, we're going to be also going through the songwriting process a bit later on as well. Really excited to get to that once we've got through all the great individual stories. So we're moving over to Lancelot next, otherwise known as Ian. So Ian, I wanted to ask you now as well where your sort of passion and love for music began.
I didn't have a great sort of like musical background at home, you could say, because my parents listened to like the Carpenters and ABBA, and that doesn't really set you up well for metal or rock later down the line. But ABBA's catchy, and so I guess at school, my mate Rich got me into nu metal, and every week there'd be a new CD that we would listen to on the bus on the way to school. So I guess that's how I got into metal. But getting into an instrument, it wasn't until 17 I convinced my parents to buy me a guitar. And I actually started out on bass. And it just kind of went from there. I self-taught myself, and I played along to songs I really enjoyed listening to. So it's a lot of nu metal and like what they call emo music, and just really angsty, I hate my parents' life sort of. I don't have parents, not my parents. Yeah, if Mum's listening to this, I love you, Mum.
So do we.
But no, exactly. But, it was the early 2000s. I was a proper angsty teenager. So, and from that, I picked up guitar. Actually, in the end, I enjoyed that more. I got into a band with Tommy years ago. I don't know how many years ago now it must have been. But must have been when I was finishing uni or something. So like 2012.
Maybe about 8 years ago-ish.
Yeah, so we formed a metal band. It didn't really go anywhere, but it was fun, and I enjoyed playing music with Tommy, and that naturally led to Struck Down. Like, they're looking for a guitarist.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, well, you sort of go along that journey. It just takes meeting one person, like what Linden obviously had with Will. You just have to meet one person, and that just sparks it all. So you've all come from very different routes into the band. That's awesome.
Tommy is the connection to Struck Down, and like you said with Linden and Will, Tommy's my Will, I guess, or my Linden, depending on how you look at it.
I see. Yeah,
and that's it. It's really simple, really. I got into rock and metal. I was watching Kerrang and Scuzz when they played decent music, and here I am playing music live. Like, well, not anymore at the moment because of Corona, but
and we'll sort of get into the future of gigging as well later on in this, I imagine too. But and also when we get to Tommy, we'll talk about how the band all connected as well. So we'll be getting into how everyone started playing together and forming Struck Down, how it became. But before that, unfortunately, I called him Anthony because I know a bassist called Anthony, and I completely slipped my mind. It's actually Andy on bass.
Oh, I've changed my name now.
The plot twist. But yes, Andy, known as the Tornado. Andy, where did your love for music begin?
My love for music was all down to my old man, because like Ian's parents, my mum just listened to nothing but like ABBA and stuff like that, like 70s pop music. And it was only when I was in the car with my dad that he played me Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous, and I was just sort of like hooked from there, like the guitar, like the dual guitar line, the bass playing, the drums and all that. And it just all sort of stemmed from there. I mean, so I predominantly was a guitarist, but it was only when Struck Down were looking for a bass player that sort of gave it a shot and whatnot, and it sort of went from there. Because like in terms of performance, my only performance was sort of like at school talent shows and stuff like that. Whereas sort of my first ever gig was with Struck Down. Like, was it 1 year ago? Someone help me out.
Just over. Wait, no. No, it was a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, what year was last year?
It was November 2018
that I joined.
Hey, it's between March and now is just a blink, so it doesn't really count in terms of time. So that's understandable.
So it's just pretty much a blur. But so that was sort of my first musical performance was Struck Down. So it's been fun from there, because I was like Will started off very shy and stuff like that, but the lads can tell you now I'm definitely not. Obviously with the gigs where I was told that I was going to be picking up my nickname, And for the whole gig, I was saying to Linden, "Come on, man, what is it? What is it? You got to tell me." No, you're not going to get told. You're not going to get told. You're not going to get told. Oh, come on, man, just tell me. And he didn't. It was only when sort of he announced me during one of the breakdowns of one of our songs, and I was sort of at first I was like, "Cool, what did he just say?" What's my name? And it was like sort of Tornado. I mean, originally he did sort of say, like, he gave me like a couple of ideas he had, and sort of, I think it was like Iron Fingers or something like that. But then that just made me sound like Iron Man's less successful cousin or something like that. But yeah, no, I'm happy with that because sort of it's, you know, a tornado causes havoc, and yeah, I suppose that's what I do. Like,
well, he's got a wireless kit now, so he is a bit of a havoc.
Yeah,
it's one of them, someone let his lead off.
Amazing
Sure,
that you
called him a light breeze.
Yeah. And you didn't even know until you were about to go on stage. That's amazing. Just keep.
Yeah, he was already on stage at this point.
Beforehand, Linden talking to me, be like, "Oh, what name should I give him?" And we bounced around a few ideas.
No, I love that. That must grow your confidence as well, because you're already on the stage and you've got, you know, your band already giving you the name, and, you know, getting the crowd hopefully behind the name and everything. It's like, you know, giving the identity of it. It's you know, that's one thing that immediately sort of struck me about the detail of sort of having all these nicknames, because I don't see it from too many other bands. So no, that's really awesome, Andy. And now we're going to be, I guess, talking to the man that brings everything together, and really beginning to how Struck Down formed. But it's on the drums, Tommy the Kid Rogers. Tommy, before we get into how Struck Down really formed together, let's go into where your love and passion for music initially started.
It's a very similar story to the rest of the boys, really. Practically from my dad. He listens to a lot of thrash metal, and kind of has ever since I was born, to be honest. So whilst all the kids were listening to like S Club 7, I was smashing out some Slayer, some Machine Head, some Metallica. So I've always been into the heavier side of things. And then I sort of, as I grew up, took my own path into what I listened to and started listening to more bands, sort of like death metal bands, and then you got bands like Avenged Sevenfold, the Rev, R.I.P. He was one of my biggest inspirations back when I started playing drums, and a lot of my stylistic choices kind of come from him. I'm nowhere near as technical as he is, but I take my sort of writing ability from him quite a lot, to be honest.
And it's clear that the sort of family influence is so strong here. I guess this is a question more for anyone, really, but would you say that you guys come from like musical families? So have your parents played in bands, or has the influence just purely come from the stuff that they've listened to and consumed?
It's a bit of both, really, for myself. Dad used to play drums anyway. I didn't start playing until I was maybe 14, 15. Me and my dad always have extensive conversations about music and what the musicians are doing and stuff like that, and there's always music in this household in one form or another, so it was kind of a unavoidable happy accident that I'd end up as a musician, to be honest.
I know for myself, I found the music I listened to, it was how much energy it sort of gave me. I wasn't really around my cousins that were in a band very much. It was sort of like maybe a couple of times a year, really, at the point where I knew they was in a band anyway. So as much as that was something that it definitely incentivized and made me want to do it because the fan is so cool. That wasn't a driving force, if that makes sense. It was just something that painted the picture for me with it.
Yeah.
Largely, it was I wanted to make something that had the same effect on people as what the music I was listening to had on me.
Yeah, so it's obviously a lot of similar influences from parents. That's really, really cool. Now, we've gone through all the individual stories of how you've all got into music. I'd love to now hear how the band came together. How did all of you become one band under the name Struck Down? Was it you, Tommy, that sort of brought everyone together?
No, not at all. You're giving me far too much credit on this one. I'm not even the original drummer, in actual fact. I think it's probably best for Will and Linden to kind of take the reins on this one, and then
absolutely,
because it all started with Wookie and the Wizard, really, and then guys, do you want to take it from there?
Jump in.
Like Will said earlier on, I was already in a band that, well, I thought we was writing really cool music. It was sleazy, which I think is what appealed to Will initially. Is it was that sort of like sleazy, sexy guitar band. Yeah, it was the first band where I'd sang in a band a couple at school, but realistically I was crap. And if I wasn't crap, the voice I have wasn't necessarily appreciated then. With that, we was going for like a package deal because we needed a drummer, and Will came as a package deal with his cousin who was a drummer. But me and Will started gelling and writing music really early on. Near enough straight away we was introduced. It came from that for me, and it got to a point with the band where that band wasn't gigging. Me and Will were going and doing open mic nights and writing just near enough every day. I didn't want the momentum I'd built up with Will to stop, because it was the first time I'd fully been able to explore my creative sort of...
It was a rush, wasn't it?
Oh, big time, because we were writing so much so often, and Will with his confidence, I think I had the confidence to get on stage, not as much as I have now. I went into it at almost a lot, so I'd make a bit of a twat of myself to start off at the bottom so I could only go up, was definitely my approach of how to learn a bit of stagecraft. But then it was just that we needed to expand, we needed to become a full band as to what the band should have been, and it was through a contact, but we won't mention his name. I think that was what put us in touch with Tommy, and the way he pitched Tommy to us was like, I know a really keen drummer who's in a band, but definitely is sort of like after more type thing. So we met at the Divers Arms with Tommy after Clinton.
And Chris had joined as bass player.
Oh, Christ. See, that's why there's certain parts of the story you should have told.
Right, I'll take over. So once me and Linden had done that, and we obviously had the ultimatum of leaving and starting our own band, we decided to get the drummer that I came with as a package deal. And
you was the one who pitched it to us as a package deal.
Absolutely, I just wanted in a band, mate. I'd have played the xylophone at that point. And so yeah, once we went off with my cousin was in a band called Forest of Flames, Kim, and he had a lead guitarist in his band called Chris, who joined us as bass player. We got another guitarist called Joe Green in, yada, yada, yada. We basically needed a drummer. He sent me to Tommy. We met up with Tommy in the Divers Arms.
We kind of ummed and ahed gigging for quite some time. Obviously still having the old bassist Chris. We gigged a lot, and I think a lot of it as well. I'd convinced myself that we didn't need a fifth member because we sound cool and we all get on really well, until we actually met Ian, played with Ian, and realised that was definitely the way forward. It made us sound so much bigger, definitely sort of upped the energy level of the set, and he got off the tram and got on the train.
Yeah, dude. The first time that you guys met Ian was, well, it was through me and our project Hunter Killer at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd been pushing for a long time, like, guys, come on, like, a rhythm guitarist with Will would mean Will's got so much more freedom and our sound will be massive. And it took a lot of convincing. It did take a lot of convincing to get
me
there.
and Linden had lots of meetings inside Asda at 3 a.m. with me trying to push on behalf of Tommy to have another guitarist.
So for someone like me then, who really has absolutely no idea what goes on behind the scenes with bands, what was the benefit then of bringing in the fifth member? What was that took it to the next level?
It means so basically. Sorry, that sounded terrible. So the
Guys, don't worry about it.
I do. No, basically, for me, like once I'd been convinced, then I started speaking to Linden and trying to get Linden to talk to Chris. A big thing for me being a lead guitarist was like every time I dropped out to solo while we were at a 4-piece, I always felt it was lacking the meat under it. Like when you hit, a big example is AC/DC. When you hit AC/DC and Angus starts the solo, Malcolm is still holding the rhythm as tight as can be, and that was a big thing for me because it always you can tell when it's one guitarist, not two. You can just hear it in tone and everything. So that was a big push on my behalf, at least.
Being a butcher, he added the meaty voice, didn't he?
I remember I had a practice with Hunter Killer. I mean, literally, I was auditioning for Struck Down straight after, and Will turned up early and sat down and was like listening to us. And I think I was actually playing guitar at that time, and Will just kind of realised, oh, this guy can actually hold a rhythm. And honestly, for being a rhythm guitarist, that's what you need. And obviously, I've been playing bass beforehand, so I'm used to holding a rhythm with a drummer. So, I think that helped as well. And I didn't realise until afterwards like how much it had been a little bit divisive about a fifth member, but it all worked out well in the end.
Yeah, it's come as a perfect storm. Oh, incredible. Well, you see, as someone like me who has no idea how all that stuff goes on, like, I'm sure if I was to hear the music, I'd know something was off without having a second guitarist, but I would never be able to put my finger on the thing. So, no, that's fascinating.
Oh, now, if you heard Wandering Child with one guitar, you'd definitely hear something off.
Yeah. We're just going to be going to two of our features now, but straight after those two features, we're going to dive deep into the song Wandering Child. I'd like to go over it, analyse it, pick apart the themes and what it all means within that song. There's a really great video attached as well. I'll make sure that all the links to all that good stuff are down in the description of this podcast, whether you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud or Spotify. But before we go to that, we've got our two weekly features that have been a staple of the show for months now. It's Sammy Bacon and Harry Monday. They do the album and film review features here on the show, bringing you weekly content, films and albums to listen to. Here is the album that Sammy would love to recommend for you all this week.
What's going on, everyone? Hope you're enjoying the podcast. Today, a recommendation from hip-hop icon, legend, one of the most innovative, I say innovative so much, I should probably find a new word, hip-hop people around, Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown. Atrocity Exhibition is Danny Brown's third album, or fourth. It's one of the, I don't know, released in 2016, and this album is brilliant, and as you may have figured out, I guess, from the title, Atrocity Exhibition being a reference to Joy Division, this album does have a semi-post-punk vibe, and I think on one of the songs he does sample the bass line from Atrocity Exhibition. It's not overtly post-punk, but then I think the more you listen to it, you kind of hear the undertones. Instrumentally, this album is just brilliant. The beats are sick. It's murky and swampy and just so engrossing, and it's one of my favourite albums. I discovered it during lockdown, and it's just brilliant, and it's got great catchy songs like Rolling Stone, Tell Me What I Don't Know, Really Don't, which features Kendrick Lamar, who kills it. It's also got features from people like Earl Sweatshirt, and it's just great, and it's not garish and boastful. He talks about, sleeping around, but not in a sort of boastful, sort of kind of horrible way. He talks about it like he's quite embarrassed by it, and it's brilliant. It's quite funny. It's quite sad at points. It's just great. And Danny Brown is just a great guy, great artist. Atrocity Exhibition, Danny Brown, check it out.
Thank you for that, Sammy. We'll tune in with Sammy next week to find out what his next album review is. Let us know in the comments or go to our Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast if you've got an album that Sammy should be listening to and recommending here on the show. Next, we're moving over to Harry Monday. He brings a film review each and every single week here to the My Generation Podcast. And here is the film that Harry would love to recommend for you this week.
This week's film recommendation is a classic movie in a way. I say classic, it's more classic rock. It's the rock opera done by the band The Who back in the 80s, known as Tommy. Now, if any viewers out there have heard the song Pinball Wizard, you'd know what the movie is about, basically. It's just a deaf, dumb blanket that plays a mean pinball. They managed to make an entire film just out of one song, which, if you look at the narrative, is incredible. The fact that you can just stretch out for so long and then condense it into just another 3-minute song. And with such wacky and zany camera techniques and just story narratives going alongside it, it's mesmerizing how crazy it is. So this week's film recommendation is Tommy.
Thank you for that, Harry, and we'll tune in with Harry next week to find out what his next film review is. Don't forget to stay tuned. Later on in the show, we've got the new 3 features of Emma Cusson's poetry readings, Joe Finnegan's video game reviews, and Tom Axtell's pirate profiles. The first time they've ever featured here on the My Generation podcast, coming up later on in the show, so stay tuned. But now we're going back to Struck Down and their new song, Wandering Child. Just to give you a little bit of detail about the song, so this is what it means. It follows the story of Father Bernard and his battle with an ancient curse in medieval England. His battle is short-lived as the curse consumes him, making him immortal and still causing havoc on modern-day life. We're going to play the song in just a moment, but did you guys want to jump in with just what this song is about?
There's a lot to it. There is a lot to it. Musically, without the story being involved, it's a turn of the page for our sound, going into more of a darker territory, coming away from that sort of hard rock, almost glam like music that we have been playing, into just something that we've matured into as musicians. It's let us be a little bit more creative. We've changed the tunings up a little bit, and basically it's just an absolute banger to play. We all enjoy playing it, even in practice after playing it, at least tens of times over at this point. At least tens of times. In terms of story, there's a lot more in the background.
Yeah, it seems like there's quite a lot of subtlety to it as well, and especially with the visuals and the themes of what it's talking about. Is this a song that you had the chance at all to perform live before lockdown?
We have once or twice, haven't we, guys?
Yeah, we've played it twice.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah, 2 or 3 times, mostly as a test to see how it transferred into a live environment. It's always seemed to go down really well.
We couldn't draw too much attention to it in a set because it was like, right, they can't remember the name of it. They just need to remember it's good.
Basically.
The actual song itself, the story, is actually based off Wookey Hole as well in Bath, and the whole Witch of Wookey Hole. So that sort of spurned the early conception of the song, if you will. Yeah,
because it's got a lot of sort of demons, witch themes, that's all there throughout the lyrical context, but also there in the visuals too. And I wanted to ask from sort of Andy, what was your perspective like playing this from a bass perspective?
I've got to say, I was really impressed, because the first time that I had a rehearsal with Struck Down, I think they literally just threw it straight at me. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting this. But musically, it's just an absolutely fun. Like, to play bass on it was absolutely thunderous. Like when we record it and when you pick it apart, like it was just absolutely sort of incredible to sort of hear it piece by piece and stuff like that. But you can really sort of, what I like about it, you can really sort of feel the bass line as well. Like not like with some bands you can just sort of just about hear it, but you can sort of really feel it. It sort of brings like the really doomy vibe from the track. You can really sort of feel that nice sort of doomy aspect of it, and it was really sort of fun to learn, because they'd already had the main riff. It was really sort of fun to learn and then obviously construct it with them. It was, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and what's interesting with every sort of band that we've spoken to about their music creating process on the show, everyone starts from a different place. And I did want to know, really, where did this song begin? Was it the lyrics? Was it just a rhythm that was generated that you built on, or was it the themes that you wanted to discuss? Where did that start?
That was Will, wasn't it? Will's got a
entirely Will singing in a cave.
Yeah, go on, Will.
So I went on holiday with my partner. We went to Bath, Wookey Hole. I hadn't been there since a kid. We were on the tour there, and the bloke was banging on about a witch. And although I was enjoying the tour, or the more he spoke about the story of Wookey Hole, about Father Bernard and witches and demons, like I just started singing the first 4 lines pretty much inside this cave at the back of the tour. Probably to the dismay of all the tour members. It sounded cool echoing off the cave itself, because we were obviously well deep in the cave at that point. And just the first 4 lines pretty much. And once I had the first 4 lines, I sang a few more at the back of this tour all the way around, probably peeing off Chloe at the same time. I got home and then pretty much while she was having a shower, I wrote the first verse and the first 4 lines of the chorus. and pretty much by the time I got back off holiday, I said, like, I've got this, got some lines. We didn't actually use them at first. We actually played something really random, and I was like, you know what? That needs the first four. I could hear the first 4 lines over it, because at the time of singing it in the cave, I was singing it almost like Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker blues style. It was just that sort of like very Crossroads style singing. But once I heard Linden humming this melody pretty much, and we were playing that intro guitar, that very doomy intro, I was like, this is the song. This is where the lyrics need to be. And it all
Didn't I shout the riff?
You were doing your typical sort of like and
Linden does typical. I'll mouth a riff to you, and can you transpose this onto a guitar?
Just point at frets and shout.
Yeah.
And then once we'd done that, it just sort of naturally flowed. So like the first few lines, well, the intro, the first verse, and the first 4 lines of the chorus were written. We turned up, gave it to Linden. I said, look. He went and wrote the rest of it pretty much, and that's it. The music just sort of flowed with it, and it just really naturally progressed into this really cool song about Father Bernard fighting this witch inside Wookey Hole Caves in Bath.
Oh, interesting. Well, and Linden, I did want to ask about what approach you took for the vocal side of this, because you do go through quite a large vocal range in this song.
Yeah. To be honest, in terms of how I write, quite often to me, I'll try and influence it in some cases, but some cases it's far better without my influence. But the boys will come up with a riff or a section. Like quite a lot recently, Tommy's come forward with like verses, and various different members are coming forward with like parts. And lyrics will just sort of like hit me with that. I find riffs will sort of tell a story or a mood, which... When it sort of tells me a mood, then I sort of will figure a character that would be in that mood. And if it tells me a story, I try and... I don't really... It's sort of like a... it's a bit unwritten, but it tells me something. And it just that, and then I get my notes out on my phone, and then that's where the lyrics come from. In terms of how I would then sing it, which I've already sort of ran through various melodies in my head by that point. Again, like the whole Father Bernard thing and the demon thing, it's that sort of frantic, sort of schizophrenic sort of style on it. It's almost having a multiple personality singing. If that was possible to actually convey, I don't know if I'm actually that talented, but it's what I tried.
No, it is a very, very good song. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And like I said before the call, it's crazily similar, interestingly, to a band called Lansdowne. So you're called Struck Down, and then when I heard the song, you're like Lansdowne too. And this is a, you know... It's and when I heard that, there could only be one band. And when I heard it, I thought it's still got its own flavour. It's still unique, and it was mainly the vocals actually that had quite a strong similar remnants, but it really carries across that feeling in the song. And now we're going to play it here for you on the My Generation podcast. Here is, by Struck Down, the song Wandering Child.
Stay
And that was Wandering Child by Struck Down here on the My Generation podcast. Really, really great to feature the song here on the show. And it's not just a song too, it comes with a music video. And I did actually want to start with Ian and Tommy really talking about what it was like making this music video.
We can't really talk about it because this is very much a YouTube. Oh, go on, Ian. Go. I'll give you a bit of background. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that Linden and Will did this music video entirely in lockdown. So between, when lockdown went in at the end of March to about, end of June, really, they did the music video all themselves, and it's completely homegrown, Will and Linden. Will explain more, I'll hand over in a sec. But they said, we're going to do this music video, and we're like, okay, go do a music video, and it's an absolute stormer. It's just amazing what the boys have done. But I'll hand it over to Will and Linden because they actually did the filming.
It started on a stormy Sunday.
Oh, God,
we were actually, I think, about 5 weeks into lockdown. Little interesting story of the self-grown music videos. It was a controversial issue within the band whether we would do it or not. So me and Linden decided to do the sensible thing and not tell him all and just do it.
And convinced them we were doing what we said we'd do.
And we didn't. Yeah, so we said we were going to do this whole Blair Witch thing, and then what we actually were going to do was not the Blair Witch thing. So we turned up at the woods, we organised it all, had a rough idea, did the first day of shooting. Everyone thought Linden was actually a father, so that was quite funny, as in like the Father Bernard character, because he was dressed up as him in the woods. And over the sort of 5-6 days, it was over about three and a half weeks. We thought 5 days, I think it was in the end. 5. We had to do 1 day of reshooting because we're professional.
Yeah.
Touchdown lighting. No, man. But yeah, so we just were there. We had a really creative idea what we wanted to do with what we could do, being it was only 2 of us, which was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be.
And so there was no crew, I assume, because lockdown, you can't have anyone.
Exactly, yeah. It was a socially distancing, friendly, budget, homegrown video. Convinced them was going to be exactly that and have no bells and whistles, because if we did bells and whistles, it would look tacky.
Yeah.
And then we strapped that bad boy bike with some bells and whistles.
I built nearly all the props, including one I had to change into a signpost.
I was going to ask about the props because there's a lot of them, and I think that's what makes the production value feel more than when you say it's just 2 people making a video in lockdown. It's quite impressive because it doesn't feel like that. How did you do all this stuff with the props?
I did really, really basic carpentry because I wanted to be a carpenter. I did all my basic.
Don't play it down, Will. We thought you was a master craftsman.
Well, come on, they do look. So I basically did the lamp, the signpost, everything. It was all pretty much just like pallet wood stuff on it. We were just trying to do the best we could with what we had. Lighting, we did a couple of nights. We're trying to work out the lighting because we had to go back one night because it was just too dark.
That's the thing. This was with we didn't have specific lenses for it. We had a good quality camera,
and a tripod.
Never had we had obviously the tripod thanks to Will's dad. It was just that. It was sort of like I hadn't actually figured out what the film button on the camera was until we'd started filming.
Wow. I see.
He took about 5 photos before he even hit the record button. So I was like, well, this is a good start.
I figured it was going to be the same button, but it weren't. So I pressed all the other buttons until it started recording.
See, I'm interested because I'm a film student. I'm always fascinated by the homegrown film angle. It's amazing because people can just make films entirely on their phone today. I mean, there's a film what's it? I've completely lost the name of it. I can actually see the poster, but I've completely lost the name.
John Wick 3.
No, there was a good. It's a good shot in the dark. There was Unsane. There was a movie called Unsane. It's a feature film that went out through the cinema circuit, shot entirely on an iPhone 7, and it's mental to know that people can take technology like that and make something believable that you can watch on screen. Can I ask what camera you shot it on?
It was a 400D Canon.
I think your Canon's a 600D.
A 600D Canon.
Clicky, clicky, boom, boom.
Yeah. It shot the film. No, that's amazing because, especially under the circumstances of lockdown, I want to sort of move into that now. Actually, talking about the constraints that sort of put on the industry, being able to actually generate a video out of it is quite special. I've seen a few musical artists who've also made films in lockdown. It's actually a massive achievement to make something like that from home because it doesn't feel like it has that kind of production value. So it feels like it's got a lot more. So please do go and check out. Again, the links are going to be in the description so you can watch the video along with the song. Now we've figured out that this was made entirely socially distant during lockdown, which is amazing. I've got a few more questions still to go for our discussion with Struck Down, and we're going to be getting into all of that good stuff. I'm mainly going to be asking them about what actually makes rock music so special to them, as well as their plans looking forward as a band as we bring the show to a close on that angle. But before we do that, we're moving into our brand new features here on the My Generation podcast. It is the first week that we are playing Emma Cusson's poetry readings, Joe Finnegan's video game reviews, and Tom Axtell's Pirate Profiles, all brand new features to the show. So if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud or Spotify, please let us know in the comments or head to our Facebook page at the My Generation podcast what you think of all of the brand new features here on today's show. And they're here to stay. They'll be here every single Thursday like Sammy and Harry have been consistently over the last few months. I think Sammy joined back in March, which feels like a lifetime ago. But here we're starting off with the poem that Emma Cusson, a poet based in the Thanet area, would love to share for you this week.
I wonder if you'll notice the start of less, the end in absence, declining of late night drives where exchanges of cigarettes and relatable memories were only relevant. If you'll notice, I'll get comfortable elsewhere in the room because I'm too perturbed to brush up against you again. Who am I kidding? This wouldn't have advanced to intimacy. I wondered if you ever noticed my little gestures, that my dreams and perfect evenings I adapted all to what I wanted with you. I wonder if you noticed how lonely I felt in your presence, because I knew I never belonged. That when the nights drew in, you never said goodnight, you always said goodbye. This poem is called Little Gestures, and I wrote it about the struggles of dating.
And thank you for that, Emma. Thank you for sharing that poem with us this week. We're going to be tuning in with Emma next week to find out what her next poem from her personal collection of work she'd like to share with you is. Emma's performed some of her stuff in the local area as well before lockdown. Really great, talented local Kent poet. Next, moving into Joe Finnegan's video game reviews. We've had him on the show a few times before talking about horror video games, and Joe's going to be recommending so many different games on this show. So if you're into PC games, Xbox, PlayStation, any other platform, Switch, or even older stuff too, he's going to have you covered. But here is the first video game that Joe would like to recommend for you this week.
Hello, Joe here, and for the next 3 episodes I thought I'd do something different with my recommendations. Normally I try and recommend games that are available on most consoles, but I thought I'd try and choose games that are exclusive to each console this time round, so 1 game each from the Nintendo Switch, PS4 and Xbox One. This episode my select game is from the Nintendo Switch, and it is Mario and Rabbids. This may be one of the lesser known Mario titles, with Super Mario Odyssey the latest main title available on the Switch, but I did have a lot of fun with this one. It's a turn-based strategy game in which you control a team made up of all the classic Mario characters such as Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, mixed in with characters from the Raving Rabbids series. You take turns in combat against classic Mario and Rabbids enemies with weapons such as missile launchers or melee weapons like hammers. The game features dynamic level design and a grid-based system, so it allows you to tactically pick apart your opponent. For instance, you could flank your opponent on one side of the map or climb onto the roof of a building to get a vantage point. It's very different to any other Mario game you'll have ever played, but I appreciated the attempt at making something different out of the Mario franchise. Mario & Rabbids currently available at Game from £20.
And thank you for that, Joe. We'll tune in with Joe next week to find out what his next video game recommendation is. Great to have Joe on the show as well, and we may have to do a full episode with him in the future again as well. He's been on the podcast a few times for sure. Next, we're moving into the final of our weekly features here on the My Generation podcast, and it's Tom Axtell's Pirate Profiles. If you listen to episode 52 of the podcast, we had Tom on talking about, the 1 year anniversary, and we found out that he was a bit of a pirate expert, as he is a history student and knows far too much about pirates for us not to introduce it as an entirely new feature. So every single Thursday, Tom brings you a story and a tale from a pirate of old, and here is the pirate that Tom would like to tell you about this week.
Hello and welcome to Tom's Prolific Pirate Profiles. Today, we are talking about Stede Bonnet. Stede Bonnet is unlike many pirates, and his early life reflects that. He was in the army before moving to a large estate in Barbados with his wife. He owned a profitable sugar plantation which brought him wealth and a peaceful lifestyle. However, in 1717, he turned to piracy with little reason. He may have been bored with an ordinary life, and he may also have quarrelled frequently with his wife. Either way, Bonnet decided to purchase his own ship, named the Revenge, which had 10 cannons. He also hired 70 good men, and paid them well. This probably kept them on, seeing as Bonnet was noted as being an extremely incompetent sailor, and an inexperienced leader. Despite this, he managed to capture and plunder a few vessels off the coast of Virginia and Carolina, although this can probably be due to the skill of his crew rather than the skill of him as a leader. While in Florida, Bonnet met Edward Teach, Blackbeard. Teach visited Bonnet's ship and quickly realised he was very pleasant with good manners. They became companions and began to sail together. Teach managed to convince Bonnet to leave command and become a guest on the Green Man's Revenge. One of Blackbeard's lieutenants took control of the Revenge. After the siege of Charlestown, which Bonnet witnessed, Teach persuaded him to receive the pardon from a governor. Bonnet decided he would prefer to be a privateer against Spain. Bonnet, however, was tricked by Teach, and Teach took all of his valuables and left him only with his ship, the Revenge, and 25 pirates on a lone island. Bonnet then sailed as a privateer. Bonnet, however, quickly grew bored of this life. He renamed his ship the Royal James and returned to piracy. Bonnet now had more experience and plundered ships along the Virginian coast. While he was set making repairs in a port in North Carolina, the authorities heard of a pirate nearby and set pirate hunters out for him. The hunter, William Rhett, quickly found Bonnet in October 1718, and the battle started. Lasting 5 hours, Bonnet was forced to surrender. Rhett was surprised to find Bonnet, however, as he was chasing Charles Vane. Bonnet and his crew were taken to Charlestown to be tried. Here, Bonnet tried to delay the inevitable by writing to the governor asking for forgiveness and also attempting escape. Stede Bonnet was sentenced and hanged in November 1718 alongside 30 pirates. And that was the story of Stede Bonnet.
Thank you for that, Tom. Tom's brand new feature, the Pirate Facts and Profiles, here on the My Generation podcast, to stay every Thursday from 6. We're now going to be going back to Struck Down, and I'd like to actually just go around, talk through with everyone actually what makes this genre of music so special to you specifically. And I'd love to actually start with Andy on this one.
What makes it so special? It just feels right. Like when you step up, well, I mean, I've forgotten what a stage looks like, but when you step up on one of them, it's just this sort of, when you hit that sort of open chord or you go straight into the music, it's got that sort of, a knee drop feel, that sort of head banging sort of thing that really sort of, it's a nice release from the outside world. You sort of, the music takes over and does its thing, and that's what makes it so special, because you can, forget about your troubles, forget about your worries, everything that's sort of, bugging you usually, and it just, the music takes over.
Yeah, oh, lovely. And Ian, for you then, what is it about rock that's so special to you?
I mean, it probably goes for all genres, but obviously I only play rock and metal, so I'm biased. But when we've played gigs and the reaction you get when you're playing the gig, and especially when you get off stage and you're talking with people who you've never met before, you may have completely different backgrounds. The music has no barriers. It's infinitely relatable, and I think that's what I like, is that it can be very much a bringing together of people who ordinarily wouldn't mix. I don't know if I would have met Linden or hung out with Linden if it hadn't been for music. So, that's what I think is so special about it.
Yeah, it's brought everyone together. And Linden, actually moving on to you then, what is it for you then specifically about rock music?
Yeah, quite like I said earlier, but obviously now creating music, it is just that. It's that I know the effect that a mad riff, or just when drums accompany a riff so perfectly that, I mean, Tommy will vouch the amount of times I've turned my head 90 degrees and done some like primal roar at him in appreciation of a riff. And it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? And then like when we've played, I mean, like when we have tested songs like Wandering Child and stuff, and you see other people that are sort of experiencing that themselves, and it's just that I think rock is very relatable because it's still got a rawness to it that most mainstream stuff doesn't necessarily. It makes it, I mean, I know a lot of people don't necessarily go for it, but it's just that the people that sort of understand it or dig it, it's really something they can see themselves. Them emotions carry across quite well, I think, and that's the effect it had on me at least.
Yeah, and it's so much energy, and I like what you guys have said so far about how, you know, people, you know, it leads to unlikely connections, because for those of you who know me in real life, and, you know, people who listen to this podcast quite a lot, you probably wouldn't expect me to be someone who absolutely adores rock music and ruins my reputation at karaoke whenever, you know, pre-lockdown, the you know, at the Penny Theatre in Canterbury, I have ruined my reputation many a time with many rock tunes up on that stage. And I feel like there's some people, this genre just brings that out of them. And I like what one of you said about energy and a release, because that is a release of energy that I think cannot often be lost in lockdown too, and it's one thing that I've sorely missed. So I couldn't agree more about the genre. I did want to move in next to Tommy. What was it for you about rock music that was so special?
It's basically mirroring what everybody else has said. But with the addition of, there's such a variety out there of rock music. You know, you've got all of your classic rock all the way up to the progressive sort of metal scene, and every single different subgenre offers such a different vibe and a different way of hearing what is essentially drums, guitar, bass, and vocals. And there's just so much that you can do with that setup. It just creates communities of various different people, all under one banner, but all listening to this like really interesting and new music, all the way down to the old classics. And I feel like the level of appreciation within the rock and metal world goes a lot further than it does, say, in the mainstream world. I feel like everyone can hear, although a certain subgenre might not be for them, you can hear the talent behind it, and you still have that appreciation of what's being done with the music.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And lastly, then, Will, what is it for you?
Everyone went in really deep, and now I've got to top everyone.
I like the guitar.
I suppose, like, me, like, from my thing, like, one thing that's always got me with rock, and this is going to sound terrible, but I love ballads, like rock ballads and metal ballads. It's always been mind-boggling to see these big, hulky, roaring, mammoth people on stage screaming about lungs, curses, witches, and then at the same time, these people are like tortured souls. So, like, when they do ballads and slower songs, you really hear that they're more human than you would put on, rather than listening to pop music where every song's about someone they've broken up with, like, and you just think it kind of becomes saturated, and you just, like, every song starts to sound the same. But when you hear the metal and metal ballads, there's such a contrast, but in a good way, where you got their heart on one end of their music, and then the next minute they've got your heart out on a stick. So it's just this. It's really hard to explain. I'm not doing a very good job here, am I?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation.
You know when you do a spider diagram and everyone just keeps linking random.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very eloquent explanation. Actually, I get exactly what you mean from that. No, they're fascinating because there are those tons of subgenres. And in fact, when we had Renegade on the show, they said that they actually did a pirate rock song. So what we should probably do is link you up with Tom, who does our pirate facts, and get you guys doing a song together. But hey, now I'm just creating ideas. But as we move towards the end of the show, I have 2 more questions for the band as a group, and then 1 more for everyone individually, as we start to look ahead to the future as lockdown eases. I wanted to start with, really, now that lockdown is starting to ease, as of the time we're recording this, which is the 15th of July, people are able to perform in outdoor settings. What is the sort of short-term plans for the band now going forward as we move into this sort of new normal?
I think we've kind of almost accepted the fact that gigs this year, they're almost off the table realistically. I mean, 6 months, it's a long time. So they may return in some form, like outdoor gigs are already happening. But there's sort of a lack of outdoor venues within our local scene realistically. Wandering Child is a single from Demons, our latest EP upcoming. That's where our focus is from a personal band level, is making sure that is the best product and the best sort of site of musicians that people can see us in. We're going to be working with some really interesting people, trying to push it as far as possible, and we've actually got a whole story set up within the EP itself, which means maybe plenty of more music videos with it, some more single drops, and basically just trying to make sure that people realise, hey, we're still out here. Although we can't gig, we're still very much active. We're still very much ready to give.
We're still trying to make the best we can put out right now, really, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. Ready to give
the full package, regardless of the sort of. If we can't go to gigs, then it doesn't mean the fans go without. We're still creating as much as is possible to create, really.
Exactly. Keeping the content going, keeping people interested in what we're up to, and most importantly, showing everyone, hey, we're a band, but we've all got our own personalities, and we love to show our personalities as much as we love to show our professional work at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that personality tends to shine through in this genre specifically as well, because especially when you're all on stage, you've all got a different stage presence, and people will see it in the video that you've shot as well. It's very true, and obviously that's sort of in the short term as we're all sort of going through lockdown. What would you say as a band are some of your biggest long-term goals and objectives?
We want the band to be our jobs. We want music to be our livelihood. I don't think that goes for all of us. We want to do music professionally. We want
Wayne's World.
We want Wayne's World. We want Wayne's World, damn it. Yeah. I mean, this day and age, I forget nowadays it's there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of bands doing what we're trying to do. But I don't think for a moment we can't do it. We're not.
Nickelback summed it up pretty well once. Well, Rockstar.
Oh, I hate that song. I mean, I give them. It was very, very commercial and very successful. I think the rest of them would agree with me. It's becoming professional musicians. You're making me so proud. Oh, thanks, man.
Well, that was a great answer, but unfortunately, I have done Rockstar at karaoke, so I'm a little bit offended. No, that's.
You've offended our host. I've got to offend someone nowadays.
No, that's a really great thing to aim for, because it's like you said, it's a very competitive industry, but you've got a really unique sound. And please, everyone listening to the show, go down into the description. I'm going to make sure all of the links for their socials are there as well, so you can listen to their song, but you can also go and find their individual profiles, because like we said in the episode, all very great personalities and all putting out their own individual content too. So please go down to the description and find their social media links. We're now coming to the end of the show, and there's one question that I ask at the end of every single episode of the My Generation podcast to all the guests individually, which is what we've learned about talking about the music creating process here on the My Generation podcast. I would like to start with Andy, if that's all right. Andy, what do you think you've learned by talking about your band's music creating process here on today's show?
I think what I've learned is sort of how everyone sort of views it differently. It's sort of amazing. Sort of you've got sort of different personalities and how everyone sort of views the music creating process or how they approach it and stuff like that. I mean, I know I approach it with, this is going to be a brilliant song, you know, how can we make this a brilliant song? I think it's sort of very eye-opening. So I don't know about the rest of the lads, but that's how I view it.
Yeah, perfect. And so for Ian, what would you say you've learnt then about being on the show talking today?
I completely disagree with what Andy just said. No, I don't. No, Andy's really hit the nail on the head. I think, a joke in the band is that we've never done a cover because we can't get 5 people to decide on the same song. And, on what we're going to cover. And I think it doesn't matter where we've come from, what we listen to, because we have quite an eclectic mix of music all round, like what we listen to in our downtime, is that we can still come together as 5 individuals with 5 very strong opinions and still create music, which I think in itself is very, very rewarding.
Yes, it sounds like it's all come together, and the song does, Wandering Child doesn't feel like 5 individuals with different ideas. It feels like one piece of music, so it definitely comes across that everyone's brought all that together. So we've now spoken to Andy and Ian about what they've learnt from today's show. And Linden, what have you learnt from speaking about the music creating process today?
I don't know, I feel as though I've learned little, but I've had a lot to appreciate whilst listening to the rest of the band's sort of ways of writing. I suppose most of which, by the time that I've gotten around to lyrics being with me and me having an input on writing, I've been able to actually sit back and watch them sort of enjoy and be challenged by writing. So I can't necessarily say what I've learned, but there's a lot that's made me smile in thinking of how lucky it is that all 5 of us really do gel. And like you said, we have influences that come from all different directions, but we believe in a vision. If someone wants to run with something, then we have to hear it out with a very democratic band that try our best to make sure that all 5 voices are heard. And I'd say I'm just lucky to watch them boys do that.
Lovely stuff. Tommy, what have you learned about speaking on today's show?
I've learned that although we've all got our own sort of individual ways of writing, obviously being on completely different instruments from each other a lot of the time, it's always about the song. Whatever fits the song best is generally what comes forward. So we're very selfless in the way that we don't feel the need to individually show off so much, as long as it fits the song and it fits the purpose of the story that we're trying to tell. We're quite happy just to push with, if it's a simplistic idea, so be it. If it's a more technical idea, so be it. As long as it comes across with the riff in mind and the energy behind it, that's how we write.
Yeah, amazing. And now we're moving lastly onto the wizard himself. It's Will. Will, what have you learned about speaking today on the show about your music creating process?
Hashtag first take. I've learned. Just edit it in. I've learned more about my fellow band members. One's called Anthony. I've been calling him Andy for the last 4 months.
I'm never going to live that down.
I think it's nice to hear all of us talking again in an environment properly, like about what our aims and goals are.
Well, thank you all so much for that. It was really great talking about the music creating process of Struck Down here on today's episode of the show. Thank you all so much for coming on the show today.
No, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, man.
Having us, yeah.
Lovely
It's been great.
stuff.
Cheers, bye.
Well, before we go, I'm just going to tease ahead quickly to the next topics that we've got coming up here on the My Generation podcast. Next Thursday, we're speaking to Aaron Thrift. We're talking actually about his music creating process as well. He is a swing singer. He recently appeared on Britain's Got Talent, and you can find, if you type Aaron Thrift, Britain's Got Talent on YouTube, you can find his audition from just before lockdown. Incredible singer. He's a performer in the Kent area and goes into why swing means so much to him. We're talking to Emily Cook. She works for Doctor Who magazine, and we had her on the podcast for episode 50. We've got her coming on in 2 weeks' time to go for another deeper dive into what Doctor Who have been doing over the past few months of lockdown, keeping content going, and the future of Doctor Who. And we've got Leo Ulf from BBC Radio Kent. We're talking about Star Wars collectible figures from the 1970s. Leo is a big collector of 70s Star Wars figures, and we're going into depth as to why collecting is such a cool hobby. I'm a Lego collector, as you know, so collecting is my jam, and I'm so excited to discuss that on the show. That concludes this week's episode of the My Generation podcast, talking to Struck Down about their music creating process. And it is a goodbye from all of the members of Struck Down.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Thank you all so much for listening, everyone, and it's a goodbye from me. I've been your host, Max, and we'll tune in with you all next week for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.